La présentation qui va être faite maintenant, le thème « Une défense axée sur l'offensive, garantir des contrôles de sécurité robustes grâce à des tests continus ». Et pour cette présentation, eh bien, c'est monsieur Michiel Lemmens qui va s'en charger de la société Sense Institute. Vous avez 30 minutes.
Merci bien pour l'introduction. Bonjour à toutes, bonjour à tous. Je m'appelle Michiel Lemmens. Je suis instructeur pour Sense Institute dans les opérations offensives. Mais là, je vais terminer la présentation en français. Je vais continuer en anglais pour accommoder nos visiteurs internationaux. Good morning and welcome to this talk about an offense-led cyber defense. Stop trusting your defenses and start breaking them. My name is Michiel Lemmens. I am a Belgian by nationality and by citizenship. My mother tongue is Dutch, you might have noticed. I also speak English and French. Si vous voulez poser des questions en français plus tard ou maintenant, n'hésitez pas, j'accommoderai aussi vos questions en français. I've been working since 10 years in cybersecurity, a little over 10 years now, in some high security environments, mainly focusing on offensive operations. And I also teach for SANS Institute, the Advanced Penetration Testing and Hacker Tools curriculum. Now, I am here to talk to you today about computers. And to do that, we have to go back to airplanes for a second. Short introduction for the subject. Let's have a talk about 1903, the year at which humanity achieved controlled, sustained, powered flight with an aircraft that was heavier than air. And the main questions that we were asking before the Wright brothers actually succeeded in making an airplane fly is, how do we achieve this sustained, controlled, powered flight? If you abbreviate that question, and you simplify it a bit, the main question is, does this thing work? Does this airplane actually fly? Does it work? And that is the main question that I want you to ask as of today at 10:35 when we close the room. Please ask yourself if your controls are working. The Wright brothers asked themselves this question, and they succeeded flying 260 meters in 1903 with their fantastic small airplane. It also is a biplane, as you can see. Whoops. It has two wings and a small front wing, which is a bit peculiar. We only see that in fighter jets today. Dual engined, very nice airplane. And the main questions they were answering was, does it fly? Well, yes, it did. There was someone else trying to achieve the same thing with a lot of sponsorship and government grants and was not successful at it. The Wright brothers were able to do it and answered the simple question, does it work? Now, nowadays we go a bit further with this, and we don't just look if the airplane actually flies, because if that was the only metric to see if air travel is a good idea with an airship, then probably you wouldn't take an airplane anymore, because they were very likely to crash. The Wright brothers' airplane crashed on their fourth run, actually irrecoverably. In the end, it was repaired, but you end up with the CS ship comparison. They had to replace a lot of parts. But nowadays, the metrics for safe air travel have gone up quite a lot. This is 3 screws that are about this high, so they're just a couple of centimeters, to be used in an airplane for secure bolting of whatever you have to bolt. They're general screws. If I go out here downtown Lille to a hardware store and I can buy this kind of screws probably for €2 a piece, max. These, because they are used in airplanes for secure air travel, they cost $137 a piece. That is the price, literally, that we pay to get these rigorously tested. If you want to put a part in an airplane, and that part is not considered something like a button somewhere that doesn't do anything important, if it's a vital part of the aircraft, this thing is tested to 150% of the maximum expected load, and then for 2 to 3 times the lifetime that they expect this part to be in an airplane. Basically, very, very, very rigorous testing, leading to air travel today being almost the safest, if not the safest way of mode of transport from point A to point B. Trains are a very close second, and ships generally are also pretty safe. But airplanes, they're a lot safer than a car. I rode here this morning on a motorbike. Can you imagine how dangerous that is compared to an airplane? That airplane is not going to fall apart. $170 a piece is what we pay for that rigorous testing. If we go a bit more meta in that, a bit more abstract, then we see that whenever risks become higher, as a society, we require more validation. My pointer has a bit of difficulty with the distance, but we require more validation. You want to become an airline pilot? Imagine what the testing there is. Medical testing, severe training, examinations. You have to pass every possible security maneuver you have to know. You have to pass that exam. You cannot fail it. Every 6 months you go back through the simulator tests, medical examinations again, very strict control, because the risk is high to other people. The same with the airplane parts. The screws that would fail, they could be hugely detrimental to people's livelihood. If we go to the lower end of that comparison, I might have to stay closer to my computer here. The lower end, we see you have writing a book, for example. You can use my mouse as well. Writing a book is relatively safe. You're probably not going to kill anyone by writing a book, right? So you can auto-declare being a writer. We don't require validation. You might not be a good writer, but that's not a security issue society-wise. Okay? So basically, that is the old cycle you see in Agile and in many other platforms and many other frameworks that allow you to manage a project. You plan something, then you do it, then you check. And if the check says, OK, we didn't achieve what we wanted, then you go back to changing your plan. You act on that, and you change the plan again. That's the cycle that is more or less expanded with more phases. We can argue about that. That's not the point. The point is, why don't we do checking consistently in cybersecurity whenever we introduce a measure, seeing if it actually works? We deploy something, but does it actually do what we think it's supposed to be doing? Why do I think this is missing? Look at the vast amount of cybersecurity incidents out there. You are all cybersecurity professionals. You can all tell me at least 10 stories that you know happened to your own employer, to one of your clients, or to someone you closely know, where a cyber attack happened and attackers managed to achieve some sort of goal. These metrics come from Veeam and Sophos. What they basically say is, in 2023, 3/4 of the people who were asked about whether or not they suffered a ransomware attack, organizations, big organizations, they were asked if they suffered a ransomware attack. 3/4 said, we saw ransomware come into our environment in some way, shape, or form. Not necessarily successful, but we saw it coming in. Okay? Of these 3/4 that got hit by ransomware, in, again, about 3/4 of the cases, there was successful encryption of some data at least. Again, not saying it's important data, not saying that this was vital to the organization. But if you calculate there how many organizations got some sort of encryption going on there on their files, it's 57%. Now, we can all argue the details about this, but nobody wants ransomware actors to encrypt anything in your organization, right? That's a problem. And in many of these cases, and this is not only low-hanging fruit, these are often organizations that are introducing security controls and that are prepared. It's more and more difficult to find unprepared organizations nowadays. Everybody's starting to get realization that cybersecurity is an issue, even in sectors where that wasn't the case or where it was more difficult to introduce it. That's a big problem. And that is, in my view, at least in part due to our lack of validating what we are introducing as controls. One example for you, endpoint blocking, App Blocker, Windows Defender Application Control, or another application that helps you block malicious applications from running in your organization. Well, very nice config. One of my clients, anonymized of course, one of my clients had this config running. They found a config online on a reputable GitHub repo, an organization that made it available, big cybersecurity provider made it available. They took that config, started customizing it to their own organization, not realizing that in actually the exclusions list, basically you allow everything in Windeer to run, which is generally safe, except the lists that you exclude, the folders that you exclude. And these folders are oftentimes folders that are world writable. You don't need admin privileges. Any user can drop an exe in there, and it will run. Well, a good config, whoops, also contains the directories at the bottom. Windeer syswo 64 tasks, Windeer tasks, 2 folders that a user can write to, and you can run executables from there. Very nice to have an app blocker config, but an attacker can enumerate that config, through userland. You have access to registry there, userland registry. App locker, you dump out the config. Oh, this is where the holes are. Drop my exe payload on there. Your app locker becomes a lot less effective. My client thought they were safe with this config. They were not. There's a big hole in there. Cyber deception, honeypot files, honey token files. One of my other clients, they had a share, which is perhaps not very legible to the back, but I'll name it out. ICT share with a help desk folder in there. Many organizations have this, bunch of scripts that allow you from any workstation to access there, and you can then run some diagnostic on a system or whatever. Still quite often in use. Help desk share contained a file called passwords.xls. Very nice way to entice an attacker to then download the file and open it. And then you see, oh, this is my honey token file. Someone opened it. There must be attackers around. Very nice file indeed. There's only one problem with this. This is so blatant, I'm never going to open this. This is one of the first files I found, because I like to look around for passwords.txt and passwords.doc. People still have these things in their home folders and in their shared folders. Always very nice to find a domain administrator password there, or a root login to whatever appliance. I found that file there. Never in my life am I opening this. Do you think the SVR, the GRU, the MSS, all these big intelligence agencies, hacker groups are going to fall for that? No. I didn't open the file, had a debriefing with my client, and they said, oh, well, we have honey token files. I'm like, yeah, you do. Here they are. Did they trigger? Ah, no, they didn't. No. Oh, I'm not falling for this. I ended up opening it in the debrief, and indeed, there's a nice security warning from Excel saying automatic update of links have been disabled, enable content, which is the notification that is trying to fetch remote content, which is generally how many of the honey token files work. Try to fetch something remote with a unique URL, URI, and then we can trigger and say, oh, there's a download here, an opening of a file here, that token file is triggered. Well, spend a lot of money on that solution, because this was a commercial solution. Spend a lot of money on it, but by implementing it badly and not asking someone who will actually look at it as an attacker, miss the whole point. And this becomes dud. You have nothing that helps you here with this solution. Oh my, that must be small for the back row. Continuous monitoring. I found an escalation path in one of my clients' organizations starting off on an SQL server. The SQL server was a member of a group that allowed it to read service account passwords. Where's my mouse? There we are. Service account passwords. You can read 2 service accounts passwords, and then you are SQL admin to an SQL server, a second one, where a user is logged in who has rights over a domain admin, basically. So that's a path of like 3, 4 steps, 5 steps from where you are on that top left part of the image, an SQL server, to actually becoming domain admin. Showed it to my client, said, OK, thank you very much, we'll solve this, but this is going through a change process. 6 months, 12 months, we don't know how long it'll take, because there's some functionality behind it that business needs. Fantastic, OK, let's do monitoring in the meantime. Let's monitor whatever goes on with this kind of stuff. Perhaps we'll see someone exploiting it. If your monitoring is at the number 1, where you read the service account password, then you have a pretty long attack path still in front of you before this is actually abused, because the attacker still has a couple of steps to do. But as we come closer to that domain admin account, you have less and less and less time to actually intervene. Because when I'm exploiting that SQL admin relationship there, well, that's a bit further down the line. You still have some time. It takes a while. We still need to escalate locally on that SQL server. Also, oftentimes not trivial, arguably, yes. If you come to the point where you detect that I abused that session, well, then we're pretty close, because then there's one step between me and being domain admin. That's probably, in this case, something of 5 to 10 minutes if I'm slow and if I have a C2 channel that's pinging not continuously, but in an irregular interval. A couple of minutes. If you're only noticing I'm changing that domain admin object there, that's the first thing you notice. That's your detection. Once I've changed that object, there's seconds between me becoming step 5 domain admin. Whenever you have this monitoring going on and you don't look at the phases of the attack where this would be exploited, you're missing vital information for prioritizing your attacks. And you learn this by getting an offensive expert in your team and actually doing that path for you and see what that happens there. One of my more high security clients was concerned about people bringing their own drivers, loading your own driver into kernel land. OK, well, we have driver signing enforced by Microsoft, and Secure Boot is protecting that. So basically, you cannot load unsigned drivers because you cannot disable the driver signing. We're secure, right? Well, I'll happily do kernel exploitation just like any other attacker might be doing. I'll happily bring my own driver and have it loaded into memory by my own executable after I exploit an existing vulnerable driver that I let disable kernel driver signing enforcement. DSC gets disabled, I load my driver, I can dump LSAS all day long. Very simple. This is not within reach of some threat actors. Not everybody will be able to do that. But if you are concerned about cyber espionage actors, there are many of them that are able to do this. Threat hunting. This is an output of Certify. Again, the same client as the Active Directory exploitation earlier. They have a certificate template, which basically allows you to request a user certificate. But there's a problem with it. There's full control to it, allocated to domain users. So basically, anybody who's on a system can modify this template. Same as before with my client, I said, here's a problem, probably something you want to fix. Yes, we will, but we have to assess business impact. So 6 months, 12 months to implement this. Let's do threat hunting to see if someone's exploiting this in the meantime. Yes, but what are you going to hunt? Requesting a certificate in this template? Because just requesting a certificate is probably happening all the time. This was their main user certificate template. You cannot monitor all of that. You'll have thousands of requests per year. That's not something you can easily digest. What you can do, though, is monitor the attack sequence that I did of first modifying that template so actually regular users can unroll certificates and then request a certificate. And that combination, together with some specific things in the attack vector, such as the enrollee supply subject, don't have time to go into that in detail. I only have 30 minutes here today, and I don't want to speak too fast. I already speak pretty fast. Having that attack executed and then collecting the logs from it greatly enhances the detection you can do here, the hunting you can do, and eliminates, in this case, a lot of false positives. Credentials, password policy, or passphrase policy. Unfortunately, nowadays, still, many organizations, and perhaps you know some, or perhaps your organization is one, 8-character password, and you choose 3 out of 4 from lowercase, uppercase, digits, and special characters. Common password policy still seen today. Increase that number of length if you want to, in secure organization. Put that to 16 and remove complexity. That's your free tip I give you. That gives me a headache as an attacker, and the more paracetamol I have to take, the better for your organization. If you have a Kerber roasting there, you can do on a service account. Again, details, I don't have another 2 hours to explain the principles, but Kerber roasting, you might be familiar. Even if you have disabled RC4 encryption, which is the slowing, the weak encryption, you've enabled AES, it's going to cost about $6 million in AWS or Azure or Google Cloud credit to actually run that cracking over the full character space of 8 characters, right? Try every possible 8-character password brute forcing. 6.3 million. By the way, if you still have RC4, it's 4,200 euros. So enable AES on these accounts and disable RC4. 6.3 million. Ransomware actors stand to make, again, big discussions we can have about that, perhaps a couple of million. They're not going to spend 6 million in cracking a ticket, even if it is a domain admin ticket that gives them access to everything, because they probably cannot ask a ransom that's high enough to justify that. But what if your client or your employer is is the target of cyber espionage actors? What if they're a defense contractor? There are many here in the room that are defense contractors. What if you're a defense contractor having interesting plans, and the other side is a cyber espionage actor who has billions with a B-size budgets? Then you can expect them perhaps to spend some 6.3 million into trying cracking an 8-character password, which, by the way, they don't know that it's 8 characters, but they see the policy as 8 characters. If you don't identify your adversary's business model, you don't find out who the threat actors are you're protecting against, you cannot make sure that you price yourself out of the victim market. make it too expensive to hack you by setting right policies based on what your attackers are going to be doing to you. Different motives people have with different skill sets. The hacktivist often has a limited budget. The cyber espionage actor has an almost unlimited budget. The cyber ransomware actor, the cyber crime actor, they have a business model, if you will. It's a business decision that they make. It's, of course, a criminal business, but it's still a financial decision. That also makes differences in what their budget's going to be, what their skill set's going to be. Many cyber espionage actors have broken through the 0-day threshold. Many ransomware actors have broken through the 1-day threshold. Well, you cannot protect against all of them, probably. So protect what matters against who is after it. The main problem we have to take into account, if you're introducing security controls, we don't have to forget to ask the question if that security control actually works. If you don't have this tested by an offensive specialist, and by God, it doesn't have to be me, you probably have an offensive security partner with your organization, ask them if you can have short-term red teamers, pen testers, hammering on things that you've changed in the config, looking at specific individual things. Have that specific modular red teaming or pen testing, whatever you want to call it, have that done to check if the changes you made to your organization have actually achieved the result you wanted to achieve cybersecurity-wise. Because if you don't test it like we test the airplane screws at maximum power for a longevity amount of time with enough attention, how do we actually know that the controls work? If we don't test it, we shouldn't trust it. And if we don't hack it, absolutely someone else will. That's all I have for you today. I'll happily open the floor for questions. We have enough time for questions. If you have further conversation you want to have about that, we are at booth D8, which is right over there, to have a conversation about this or any other cybersecurity topic you want to talk about. But if there are any questions, I'll happily take them in English ou en français, c'est comme vous voulez, of in het Nederlands. Dutch is perhaps a bit of a challenge.
Eh bien, messieurs, dames, s'il n'y a pas de questions, en tout cas, si éventuellement vous voulez en poser, Monsieur Michael Lemons se fera un plaisir d'y répondre sur le stand, j'imagine. Est-ce qu'on peut donner...